Chapter 12. Daily Life at the Ashram. Introductory quote, "Let activities go on, they do not affect the pure self. The difficulty is that people think they are the doer. This is a mistake. It is the higher power which does everything, and people are only tools. If they accept that position, they will be free from troubles, otherwise they caught them." Subchapter: Ordered Daily Routine. Life at the ashram was extremely well ordered. Tidiness, cleanliness, thrift and punctuality were expected from everyone. Arthur Osborne remarked, "Bhagawan Sri Ramana was meticulously exact, closely observant, practical and humorous. His daily life was conducted with a punctiliousness that Indians today would have to call pure Western. In everything he was precise and orderly. The ashram hall was swept out several times daily. The books were always in their places. The cloths covering the couch were scrupulously clean and beautifully folded. The loincloth, which was all he wore, was gleaming white. The 2 clocks in the hall were adjusted daily to radio time. The calendar was never allowed to fall behind the date. The routine of life flowed to a regular pattern. In the later years, when Ramana had ceased working in the kitchen and had started to supervise the building projects, his timetable was as follows. He would rise at approximately 3:30 a.m., at 5:30 he took his bath, and at 6:30 breakfast was served. This was followed by the first walk on the hill. At 8:30 a.m. he read the incoming mail, and at 9:45 a.m. he made a short visit to the cowshed. Lunch was served at 11:30. Around midday he went for a second walk, which this time lasted an hour and took him to Palakuthu. At 2:30 p.m. there was coffee, and at approximately 4 p.m. he read the outgoing mail. Half an hour later he again went for a walk for an hour. After this, the Veda Parayana was chanted, followed by the Tamil Parayana. At 7:30 the bell called everyone to dinner. Afterwards, Ramana went to the cowshed again, and at 8:45 p.m. all devotees retired to their lodgings. It is reported that Sri Ramana slept very little at night. He also never lay down flat, but remained upright, leaning against the back of the couch. After lunch, everyone in the ashram liked to withdraw to take a nap. Not so Ramana. He often made use of this quiet hour to feed the animals or make a round through the ashram and inform himself of the progress of the building projects. In spite of the increasing numbers of visitors, Sri Ramana led an active life. In addition to cooking and supervising the building projects, he read the proofs of the books which were to be published. By now his works had been translated and printed in a number of Indian dialects. He had written his famous hymns to Arunachala around 1914. From 1923 to 1929, he wrote Upadesa Saram, the essence of instruction in 30 verses, Upadesa Manjari, spiritual instruction, and Uladuna Padu, reality in 40 verses, with supplementary verses. This was followed in the 30s and 40s by various translations into Tamil, Malayalam and Telugu of important Advaita scriptures, such as certain parts of Vivekachudamani and other scriptures by Shankara, some verses of the Bhagavad Gita, and parts of Yoga Vasishta and the Agamas. The English translations of all these works can be found in the collected works of Ramana Maharshi, so Ramana regularly spent a lot of time proofreading these publications. He also read everything that was written about him and was very particular that everything should be accurate. When a biography was to be published about him in Telugu, entitled Ramana Leela, he painstakingly went through it, correcting any mistakes. He was equally conscientious in the way he dealt with the incoming and outgoing mail. He read all the incoming letters, and although he never answered letters himself, others did this for him. He carefully read through the outgoing mail, and made corrections if need be or gave instructions as to how the answer should be phrased. He also did bookbinding work. Now and then people would bring him old books in poor condition. He checked whether they were complete, added any missing pages by copying them out himself and inserting them, and then repaired the books. Just as he never wasted any food, so he also never wasted any paper. He would collect any paper which was still usable, often cutting it up into small sheets, which he would then bind together to make notebooks. Even the pins from the newspapers would be kept. They will otherwise be merely thrown away. We shall use them. How should we get new ones? They have to be bought. Where is the money? He would say. The regular walks were also a fixed part of the daily routine, though they became shorter as the numbers of visitors increased and the various building projects were commenced. In the later years especially, he was not able to put a foot outside the door without being accompanied by a small crowd of people. Solitary walks on the hill had become impossible, although at times he managed to slip away without letting anyone know. As soon as people noticed, they all wanted to come with him. As happened one day when he wanted to go up to Skandashram alone. The result was a kind of mass migration. When he was asked by his devotees to climb to the top of the hill with them, as he knew the way best, he replied jokingly, "If I come, everyone in the ashram will join me. Even the buildings will come with us." In the later years, the restrictions became so great that he could no longer move around freely. Everything was governed by a timetable. A barrier was erected to prevent people touching him. He called this enclosure his cage. They have put bars around me, though wooden, as in the Gaol. I may not cross these bars. There are people specially deputed to watch me, and they keep watch on me by turns. I can't move about as I like. They are there to prevent it. One person goes and another comes according to turns. What is the difference between these people and the police, except that the former are not in uniform? Even if I want to go out to answer calls of nature, they must follow me to protect me. Even my going out must be according to the scheduled time. In the early years, Sri Ramana attempted on a couple of occasions to leave the ashram for a life of solitude. Vasudeva, the same who once witnessed Ramana's second death experience at Tortoise Rock, relates, "Once Bhagawan and I went round the hill during the Skandashram days. When we reached near Ishanya Mutt, about 8:30 a.m., Bhagawan sat on a rock and said with tears in his eyes he would never again come to the ashram and would go where he pleased and live in the forests or caves away from all men. I would not leave him and he would not come. It became very late. We went there about 8 or 8:30 a.m., and even when it became 1 p.m. we were still in this deadlock. Bhagawan asked me to go into the town and eat my food and then come back if I wanted. But I was afraid that if I went, Bhagawan would go away somewhere. Finally, the Swami of Ishanya Mutt passed and invited Ramana to the mutt. With that, the escape attempt was failed, and he had no other choice than to return to Skandashram with Vasudeva. Sri Ramana also reports about 2 other escape attempts. Another time, too, I wanted to run away from all this crowd and live somewhere unknown, freely as I liked. That was when I was in Virupaksha cave, but on that occasion my plans were frustrated by Yogananda Swami. I tried to be free on a 3rd occasion also. That was after Mother's passing away. I did not want to have even an ashram like Skandashram and the people that were coming there then. But the result has been this ashram, Ramanashram, and all the crowd here. Thus all my 3 attempts failed. When someone remarked that Sri Ramana could leave the ashram when he liked, he replied, "What can I do? If I go off to the forest and try to hide, what will happen? They will soon find me out. Then someone will put up a hut in front of me and another person at the back. and it will not be long before huts will have sprung up on either side. Where can I go? I shall always be a prisoner. Another fixed part of the daily schedule was the chanting of the Veda Parayana. At first, Brahmin boys used to come from town to do the chanting. Later, with the assistance of Major Chadwick, the ashram opened its own Veda school, Patasala, which is still in existence today. The chanting of the Vedas in the morning and evening lasted around 40 minutes. Texts from the Vedas were recited, as well as other Sanskrit texts, such as, for example, the 40 verses in praise of Ramana by Ganapati Muni and Sri Ramana's Arunachala Pancharatna and Upadesa Saram. This was then followed by the so-called Tamil Parayana with other works by Sri Ramana. Strictly speaking, only Brahmins are allowed to be present at the Veda Parayana, but Sri Ramana wanted everyone to participate, so Brahmins sat next to non-Brahmins and Indians next to Westerners. The Maharshi attached great importance to this chanting, stressing its calming effect upon the mind. If he was asked if people should not also understand the texts, he would say that it was not necessary, it was sufficient to use them as an aid to meditation. He himself would sit upright on his couch during the chanting, his eyes taking on a faraway look. Subchapter: The Ashram Management. The various ashram rules had to be followed by all. For example, it was considered important that men and women should sit in separate areas in the hall. Women were not allowed to stay in the ashram overnight. In general, only those who worked in the ashram were allowed to live there. Anyone who wanted to meditate could take up residence at the Palakothu Sadhu colony, but they had to take care of themselves. Families lived in Ramana Nagar, a settlement near the ashram. The rich devotee Gaunda, the same one who had offered the first couch to Sri Ramana, had purchased the area for this purpose. So, in the ashram itself, there was only accommodation for visitors and devotees who worked there, with one or two exceptions, such as, for example, Major Chadwick, Devaraja Mudalia, and Yogi Ramia. Sri Ramana left the management of the ashram to his brother. As Savadikari, Chinnaswamy endeavoured to retain full control over everything that happened there. This frequently led to arguments with devotees who disagreed with his decisions, but whatever was eventually decided had to be accepted by all. If someone complained to Sri Ramana about Chinnaswamy, the Maharshi protected his brother and never reversed his decisions. If a devotee was guilty of a serious breach of the management rules, he could be banned from entering the ashram, but this was generally only a temporary exclusion. It was enough to apologize or to promise to abide by the rules in future to be allowed to return. There was no point in complaining to Sri Ramana, as he never interfered in such disputes. When Ganapati Sastri, not to be confused with Ganapati Muni, was banished from the ashram, he complained to Sri Ramana, "Chinnaswamy has told me not to come to the ashram. Bhagawan is just sitting like a stone Vinayaka statue. I have served the ashram for a long time. I have also donated 3 almiras, cupboards, full of books to the ashram. Will Bhagawan not ask Chinnaswamy why he is not allowing me to come to the ashram?" But he received no answer to his complaint. Whenever someone wanted to interfere in ashram affairs, Ramana would warn, people walk up the drive to the ashram in search of deliverance and then get caught up in ashram politics and forget what they came for. If such matters were their concern, they need not have come to Tiruvannamalai for them. And to enthusiastic reformers he advised that it would be sufficient for them to reform themselves. If conflicts were brought to him to settle, he would answer, if people with different opinions give up their mona, silence, which is the embodiment of love, and come to me and say, "We will do this, and we will do that," and inquire of me what I like better of the two, what can I say? If you all agree upon a course of action and then ask me for my opinion, I would then say it is all right. But when you are of two opinions, why do you come to me and ask me which I like the better? What I like is to know who I am and to remain as I am with the knowledge that what is to happen will happen and what is not to happen will not happen. Is that not right? Do you now understand what Bhagavan likes best? There were, however, cases when Maharshi raised objections. When, for example, the ashram management decided to close the doors of the hall for 2 hours after lunch because of his weakened health. He protested by leaving the hall and sitting outside to welcome the visitors, commenting, "The management is welcome to close the doors, but I am free to meet the visitors here." In cases such as this, where the decision of the management meant that his devotees were prevented from coming to him for a time, or if it would lead to some injustice, he could be uncompromising, saying, "You can look after your ashram. I am going back to the hill." Subchapter: Sri Ramana's personal attendants. Sri Ramana's personal attendants were chosen by Chinnaswami. Ramana himself never asked anyone to serve him, nor ever sent away an attendant who had been allotted to him. It became the tradition in the ashram that the attendants were always young unmarried men. Annamalai Swami reports, once, when a woman who was a qualified nurse from North India volunteered to be an attendant, Bhagavan replied by saying, "Ask the people in the hall." Krishna Swami, the chief attendant, and some of the other people in the hall objected. No, we cannot have ladies doing service to Bhagavan. It is not proper." Bhagavan turned to the woman and said, "These people all think like this. What can I do?" One of the attendants' tasks was to receive the food offerings brought by devotees and give some of it back to them as prasadam. They had to be careful that the men sat on one side of the hall and the women on the other. Whenever Maharshi left the hall, one of them had to accompany him. The other one stayed back to clean the hall. The cloths on the couch had to be kept clean. Washing the cloths and preparing warm water for the morning bath was also the duty of the attendants, as was accompanying Ramana on his nightly walks to the toilet. There was, therefore, someone there to be helpful to him round the clock. Sri Ramana was strict with his attendants, insisting that they carry out their duties meticulously and punctually. He did not let them get away with anything. At first, Krishna Swami often used to fail to chase away the monkeys during their raids into the hall to steal fruit. He was rebuked for this by Sri Ramana. Thereafter, Krishna Swami became a keen monkey chaser. He armed himself with a catapult and drove the monkeys away with it as soon as they appeared. Something similar happened with the attendant Rangaswami, who also failed to chase away the monkeys and instead liked to meditate. Ramana scolded him, "If you want to meditate like this, go somewhere else. If you want to live here, you must do service like everyone else. Meditation is contained in your service to the Guru." One of Sri Ramana's characteristics was that he never asked for anything. If the attendant had no idea of what he might need, he did not ask for it. He did not want anyone to be troubled on his behalf, not even his attendants. So the attendants were trained to know what Sri Ramana might want, whether it be something to drink, to wash his hands, or to read the newspaper. They knew without him having to say. They were helped by the fact that there was a fixed time for almost everything. Major Chadwick tells the story of the betel. In this case, the attendant's omission resulted in Ramana simply giving up chewing betel. One morning, Bhagavan was about to go out and was only waiting for the attendant to give him the betel, which was always placed by his side when it was time for his walk. For some reason, the attendant did not do it. Everybody in the hall was waiting expectantly, but could do nothing about it, as the management did not allow anybody to attend on Bhagavan except those who had been specially detailed. Eventually, Bhagawan got up and left the hall without it. From that day on, he never chewed again. Although Sri Ramana could be very strict with his attendants, he was also very concerned for their welfare. In summer, when he used to walk to Palakolthu between midday and 1:30 p.m., the sandy path was so hot that walking barefoot could be very painful. Ramana always walked at the same steady pace, whether it was raining cats and dogs or whether the sun was blazing down, but he used to say to the attendant walking behind him, "Run, run, and take shelter under that tree. Put your upper cloth under your feet and stand on it for a while." Similarly, Ramana's concern was extended to Rangaswamy when he had to copy out several pages of a book. One day, Bhagavan asked me if I had completed the job. "I do not have the time for it," I said. "What are you doing now?" he queried. "I am going to Palakolthu to wash your codpiece." Bhagavan said, "Okay, you do my job and I will do yours." So saying, he copied the remaining pages. Subchapter: Meals in the Ashram. Sri Ramana always took care that devotees had enough to eat. Often he personally ensured that they were served a meal upon their arrival at the ashram. One of Sri Ramana's principles was that under no circumstances did he want to be treated differently or better than anyone else. This was particularly apparent in the dining hall. In order to be sure that all were served the same as he himself, he took very little if he was served first. He later insisted that all others had to be served first and that he should be served last. One day, when Sori Nagama was handing out fruit from her nephew in the hall, she served Sri Ramana first, then everybody else. At the end, it was found that there was not enough fruit for everyone. So one of the attendants cut the remaining bananas into small pieces. Ramana said indignantly, "This is what I don't like. Why do you serve when you cannot give the same quantity to all people? If you serve Bhagavan after you serve all the others, there will be equal distribution. If by chance nothing remains, it does not matter if I don't get anything. If all eat, I am satisfied even if I do not get my share." To prevent those sitting in the last rows being at a disadvantage and having nothing of the best dishes left for them, he would wait until the very last person had been served before eating. It was his general custom not to touch anything on his banana leaf until all had the same on theirs as he himself. On special occasions, such as his birthday, Jayanti, the anniversary of his mother's death, Mahapuja, and at Karthikai Deepam, lots of people, often hundreds, and in the later years even thousands came, all of whom had to be fed. On such days, meals had to be served in several shifts. Ramana then liked to join the last group. The principle of equality of all was also respected with regard to the daily feeding of the poor, which took place at 11 a.m., whereas devotees and Ramana had their lunch at 11:30 a.m. only. The poor received the same food as the ashram inhabitants. He was very particular about this too. One day he noticed that the feeding of the poor outside was not carried out correctly, and one of them did not receive his share. The next day, when the poor had formed a queue for their meal, he went outside and said to those serving, "If you do not give them food first, I will not come to the dining hall at all. I will stand under the tree along with these people, stretch out my hands for food like them, and when I am given a ball of food, I will eat it, go straight to the hall, and sit there." There are lots of dining hall stories which make clear how fiercely Maharshi resisted any preferential treatment of his person, as, again and again, devotees tried to serve him a special delicacy or a larger share than others. The cook Santama also had to learn her lesson. At the beginning of her stay at the ashram, she served Sri Ramana an extra portion on his leaf, which he at once noticed, saying angrily, "Why did you serve the Swami more of the curry than the rest? Have you come all the way here to learn this?" If you serve more to others and less to me, I would be happy. Do you want to purchase grace by serving extra? If you show the devotees the same love as you have for me, then your love for me too will grow. Sri Ramana did not want anything special done for his health. Once he alone was served rice, whereas everyone else was served boiled wheat. When he asked Chinnaswami why this was, he was told, "Wheat is not good for Sri Bhagavan's health." Ramana retorted, "Oh ho, are you a doctor? Serve me the same as is served to others. Make no discrimination." And when someone suggested that Ramana should regularly take orange juice for his health, he said that in that case 200 glasses of juice would be needed. Do you want me alone to gulp down the drink with all of you watching, empty-handed? Moreover, how can poor people like us provide for 200 tumblers of juice, paying 50 rupees every day? Mudalia Patti, also known as Mudalia Granny, and Echamal, who had both been bringing food up the hill to Sri Ramana since the early years, refused to be deprived of this privilege in later years. They used to cook at home and bring the lunch to the ashram in a basket. Echamal cooked enough for around 2 people, Mudalia Patti for 4. Both had the privilege of serving their food personally to Ramana and the devotees. When the kitchen at Ramanashram was better equipped, this no longer made any sense. Ramana asked the women to spare themselves the trouble in future, but they were so fond of it that he didn't insist. For the Brahmins' sakes, a certain importance was attached to the observation of caste rules. Brahmins are only allowed to eat together with members of their own caste. To enable them to obey this rule, the dining hall was separated in 2 by a bamboo screen. On the one side, the Brahmins had their place, on the other side, the non-Brahmins. Sri Ramana sat in the opening of the screen on the non-Brahmin side and was visible to all. Again and again, Brahmins tried to sit on the non-Brahmin side and circumvent their own caste rules in the ashram. They argued that with Ramana there were no caste differences, but he did not accept their arguments as long as they continued to apply caste rules at home. Apart from this, no differences were made in the dining hall and in the hall. The poor sat alongside the rich, the educated alongside simple workers. There was always a great celebration for Sri Ramana's birthday, Jayanti, which, according to the Tamil calendar, falls either at the end of December or at the beginning of January. The custom was started in 1912 when he was living in the Virupaksha cave and when, for the first time, devotees organized a feast for him. At first he refused and wrote down the following 2 verses, explaining his reasons. You who wish to celebrate a birthday, inquire first who was born. One's true birthday is when one enters into the eternal being which shines forever without birth or death. Of all days, on one's birthday, one should mourn one's fall into samsara. To celebrate it as a festival is like adorning and glorifying a corpse. To seek one's self and merge in it is wisdom. But Ramana's protests were to no avail. His followers argued that they were celebrating his birthday for their own sakes, and Maharshi need have nothing to worry about. So the festival became a tradition. Sri Ramana sat outside on his couch or on a podium decorated with flowers. Music was played, poems were read in different languages to honor him, and a festival meal was served. Any poor person who came to the ashram received a meal. In the later years, the festival was attended by thousands, with the police and scouts being deployed to ensure that everything ran smoothly. The anniversary of Alagamal's burial, Mahapuja, and Karthikai Deepam were celebrated in the same way as Jayanti. Major Chadwick writes in his reminiscences, Bhagawan always radiated tremendous peace, but on those occasions when crowds were attracted to the ashram, such as Jayanti, Mahapuja, Deepam and such functions, this increased to an extraordinary degree. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe to Biography Central channel and share with your friends. This will help us reach more viewers.